Mm. Yes, okay, and we're live. Hello and welcome. This is I don't know, is this my first live stream? I'm with Aaron Clarey once again, a brilliant economist and author of several books, including Enjoy the Decline, Reconnaissance Man, and Worthless. Links to his book will be in the description if you're listening this post upload. They're not there now because, well, you know what? I'm not really good at YouTube. But anyway, we are going to be discussing macro US and world economics and a few other things. So you can, guys, if anybody's listening to this live in the chat, you can post questions and we'll try to get to them. But my question is to Aaron now, and I'm going to let him speak in a minute because I know he's chopping at the bit there. Is the US dollar going to collapse? And if so, when? Okay, Aaron, buddy, go for it.
Tuesday, January 22nd at 3:45 p.m. 2020. Boom, we're done. We're done. There we go.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. That's
Good night. Good night. Scotches are on me.
And cigars in the lounge, buddy. Yeah.
No, it's funny you asked that because here's the thing, and I'll give him credit because he was the second best professor I have at Dr. Galone, Professor Galone over at the U of M. I don't even know if he's there anymore. I asked him a question. I said, well, how do you know when to sell a stock? Because we were talking about stock valuation. And he looked at me and says, if you could figure that out, there's some gentleman in New York that would love to pay you $10 billion a year to go work for him. And it's true. That's the thing with economics. Economics is not a science. This isn't engineering. It's not math. We use math and statistics to analyze it and predict it to the best of our ability. But there's no way to tell. Will the U.S. dollar collapse? Yes. All currencies inevitably collapse if for any other reason that the empire, the country itself collapses. But when that's going to happen, nobody can predict it. And anyone who claims is a liar. And that's why I always mockingly say or jokingly say that I'm the world's greatest economist, because I admit right up front that I don't know jack shit. I don't know anything. And once you operate from, it's the same thing like, hey, how do you meet women? Hell if I know. And that makes me an expert on women because at least I'm up forward in front enough to admit I don't have the answer.
Well, that's the theory of, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Nassim Taleb, the author of The Black Swan. I remember seeing him in an interview one time, and he says, I wake up every day and I admit the fact that I don't know anything. And he goes, I think that's what gives me an advantage over all these other economists and prognosticators about the economy, was him just flat out admitting that he doesn't know what's going to happen. I mean, the whole concept of a black swan event. Now, as you said, all currencies will collapse eventually, but, the same thing, I mean, the sun's going to explode at some time and all economies will, will collapse. Right. So let's try to like narrow it down, more than that, because that's, that's this, everything is finite. Ultimately, our lives are, I mean, my point is this something that we have to be worried about in our lifetime?
Well, maybe. As time goes on, in the olden days, let's say go back 10 years ago, I was really concerned about the U.S. debt, U.S. deficit, the traditional classical economics that would apply to any entity. Everyone thinks that just because it's a government, well, then things are a little bit more complicated. No, it's not. It's no different than an individual or company. If you run up more debts than you can possibly hope to pay back, you're going to become a Greece or a Venezuela or a Mexico, or frankly, any country in the history of the world, and you won't be able to pay back your debts. However, throw in a curveball, and that is the concept of a world reserve currency, wherein usually throughout history, not always, but more often than not, there would be a dominant economy, a dominant country that whether you liked it or not, you respected it, Rome being the perfect empire. And so no matter what was going on with Rome, you could be the Galatians, you could be the Thessalonians, you could be whoever, I'm sure I'm missing them by.
The Celts, whatever.
You could be the Gauls, the Celts, whatever. You would take their silver coinage. And the reason why is that there was a
denarii,
not to mention denarii, yeah. The larger point is that there was something backing up that that coinage, and that was the Roman Empire. Its economic production, its military, and its legal system. So what ends up happening is like you could have your own, say, Gaul currency, because of the reputation and strength of Rome, you would gladly use their currency as in exchange. And the same thing happens in in today's economy, and starting back in World War II, you have economies that can become dollarized. So, for example, you come here from Jamaica and you got your Jamaican dingbats. I don't know what their currency is, probably the dollar, but you come here with the Jamaican currency. They're gonna look at this thing, get that toilet paper out of here. You can't buy anything, but you go to Jamaica with dollar bills, they'll gladly do that. You go to any country, pretty much any country, unless it's a very stable first world country, you'll be able to get stuff for dollars because of the United States reputation and its overall, its military strength and its economic production. So the world reserve currency, which the US dollar is no doubt it not only has this faith and trust and can act as a surrogate currency in case your country is corrupt or you have inflation or hyperinflation, but also if you look at international trade, which is huge, that's multiple trillions of dollars a year, you need your trade terms denominated in a stable currency, a stable unit of measurement. So if you are, say, I'm trying to think of not an outright kleptocracy crap hole like Venezuela, but let's say you're a marginal country where you're not too sure about terms. Let's say you're in Indonesia and you'd like to export some rubber plants from Indonesia, which they have them, and you would like to sell it to another country not too sure of, Paraguay. And I don't want the Indonesian, what was their currency? No, ringgit is Malaysian, whatever the Indonesian currency. I don't trust the Indonesian currencies. The Indonesians don't trust the Paraguayan currencies. Well, what are we going to denominate our terms in? What are you going to take payment in? Well, pretty much everybody accepts the US dollar. And so beyond the domestic demands for the US dollar is a global demand for this currency. And that fundamentally changes the game where you could say, all right, yes, what have we? We've, since Clinton, more than quadrupled the national debt. Our fundamentals are horrible, but because we're, quote, the United States, there is such overseas and foreign demand for this currency, be it for international trade, preservation of value, hiding money, stable, whatever. This money, specifically this inflation that would normally occur with quadrupling your money supply, is more or less outsourced overseas. It's exported away to foreign countries. So the United States is in this kind of unique position where we can print off our money, but it won't immediately cause hyperinflation because it is absorbed by the rest of the world economy for things that go beyond our domestic production.
Okay, but now you were talking about the idea that, you know, massive money printing has been going on. Well, geez, I don't know when in the United States you would know exactly when we really got out of control with the money printing. I'm not sure exactly when that happened. I do know exactly when we became the quote unquote world's reserve currency, which was in 1944, near the end of World War II. When all the allies got together for the Bretton Woods Agreement, which is a place in, where is it, New Hampshire or Maryland or where?
I don't know. It sounds New England-y, snooty, Brenton. Yeah, it sounds like a guy's face you'd want to punch. Let's go punch Brenton.
Anyway, it was the Bretton Woods Agreement. That's when we quote unquote became the world reserve currency. So, you know, people, you know, you might want to just briefly give like a very layman's definition about what that means. People say world's reserve, reserve what currency? That, you know, so if you could just give, you know, a 10-second basically what that means.
Well, it means that, well, kind of what I was saying before, that let's put it in context. We're coming up on the end of World War II. Most of the industrialized world had been destroyed. Only the United States and Canada more or less remained. And are you going to trust the new Deutschmark that's coming out in a post-World War II Germany? Are you going to trust the Japanese yen? What are they going to, you know, what's Japan going to sell? Like radioactive dirt? So in order to have a unit, because money's very important. Money is a vital tool. Without money, an economy simply can't grow. You need to be able to exchange goods and services, save up for investment, buy large items like factories that'll employ people. So we're talking almost on the cellular level, if we were to relate it to biology. money is like blood cells. You need it to flow to different areas so that your body can grow. And to rebuild economies, you had to have some kind of currency. Now, obviously, in the post-World War II era, you had the yen, you had the new Deutschmark. France, I don't know what they did with that currency. They had their own currencies, but to give it any kind of value, dollars only really had any kind of worth. So you had the Marshall Plan, where we invested over $1 trillion in post-war Europe. We would make loans, the IMF, World Bank, all this other stuff to get the world economy back on its feet. So again, this gets kind of back to the issue of trust. Does the 1946 Japanese yen have value? I don't know. You're not producing anything. You're cleaning up rubble is what you're doing. So to provide kind of a temporary fix to your currency and monetary system and problems, what we're going to do is we're going to have the dollar be the de facto world currency for a while until everybody kind of gets online. So it allowed for international trade. It allowed for investment. It allowed for contracts. And it also allowed people to save, because you didn't know where these countries' currencies were going to go. So people would want to invest.
Yeah, they would want to exchange. They would want to exchange their currency for like some sort of tangible goods, whether it be real property, gold, food. I don't know, whatever. Mm-hmm. I kind of equate this, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but the idea that the United States becoming the reserve currency and backing up the currencies of all these different countries, whether it was the New Germany, the French franc, the British pound, who like you said, their industrial capacity was more or less wiped out during the war, as far as I understand. I mean, they were they were pretty much totally decimated. But it was kind of like equating it to someone co-signing a loan for someone else.
Yeah, that's kind of the, because here's the thing is like it's like your parents, they could co-sign a loan for a mortgage. Well, what does that really mean? Well, it means that their productive capacity, because it's not, paper has no value, it's just paper. What it really means is the productive capacity behind their signature would guarantee your perhaps lack of productive capacity to make good on the mortgage, and you're just paid a certain wage. That's up to the labor market to decide. But yeah, it really boils down to faith and trust into whether or not that currency is going to have its value. And ultimately what that means is, are there goods and services that I can exchange a US dollar for? So in 1945, yeah, there were goods and services you could exchange a dollar for. The same could not be said for the Deutschmark, the yen, even the British pound, the French franc, the Italian lira. You had all the money in the world. You could print off the printing presses, that's fine. But if Italy's bombed the snot, and France has bombed the snot, and Britain has bombed the snot, those respective currencies have no corresponding goods or services to purchase.
Right. And so in a way, it's more I don't want to say more psychological, but at least strongly partly psychological than it is mathematical, because it comes down to faith, whether or not people have faith in a currency, that it'll be around tomorrow or next week or next year.
Right. And I think you short sell the psychology, and you are right. Psychology plays a huge role, but ultimately economics in the form of production is what plays out. And I don't know if humans, or even, I almost could guarantee you, most people didn't delve into the economic philosophy of what gives a currency value and stuff like that. But I think humans on an intuitive level know that, like, hey, I don't want French francs because I can't get anything in the market for it. But my God, with US dollar, heck, even the GIs introducing things like chocolates, cigarettes, nylon, and then of course prostitution runs. I mean, that was purchased. Booze, all the vice. Do we need food for our kids? Nah, fuck it. But we need whores and booze and cigarettes. By God, God bless the American dollar for it.
Hey, look, man, if you had just been fighting in the shit for a couple of years, where are your priorities going to be? Especially if you're like 20 years old. You know what I mean? Yeah. You've just been dodging bullets for 2 years. You're 20 years old. You're like, look, man, I got to get laid. I need a smoke and maybe some chocolates afterwards. All right? Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but no, you're absolutely right. Psychology does play a huge role in it. But in the end, if you're going to do the accounting side, I guess it would be called, there has to be tangible goods that ultimately back up the value of a currency, because quite literally, and you see this with hyperinflation, Zimbabwe, I mean, what are you going to do? Buy a tree What are you going to buy in Zimbabwe? There's no production to go with the trillions upon trillions of Zimbabwean dollars. And so that's basically what it boils down to, is there has to be an economy producing real goods and services that have value, that people want, that then ultimately provides collateral, cachet, genuine value to the currency by which you're going to use to trade and exchange those goods and services.
Well, it's interesting you brought up Zimbabwe, because I've thought about that, and a lot of people use that as the ultimate recent example of hyperinflation. Because when we were kids, when they talked about hyperinflation, everybody remembers post World War I Germany. I actually wrote a paper on that when I was in college. Actually, hyperinflation of World War I Germany, and it was an interesting thing. The workers in Germany actually went on strike, not necessarily demanding higher wages, but just so that they could have breaks 5 times a day, so they could give their money to their wives. So they would get paid 5 times during the day. They wouldn't just get paid, at the end of the day. They would get paid at 5 separate times during the day, because the inflation was so out of control that their wives would be waiting for them to go exchange, the paper for, eggs and milk and, whatever.
A chair.
A chair, yeah. What God knows what. I mean, that's how out of control it was, because they're kind of like what happened after World War II. But after World War I, Germany was totally devastated. Not just their industrial capacity being destroyed, but also because the reparations and sanctions laid on them after the war prevented their economy from regenerating, and all their natural resources, little natural resources Germany actually had. It's not a country of a lot of natural resources, except I understand they're really good at making cool uniforms, but other than that, they don't really have a lot. But they because everything had to be imported in Germany. So when they lost their ability, when their currency lost any value to anyone outside it, they were like totally screwed. So this is kind of like going back to a modern day example of that is Zimbabwe. And I remember someone on the internet one time when right before Zimbabwe completely collapsed, they had $1 billion Zimbabwe dollar. And the funny, I mean, it's one funny thing to have a dollar that has $1 billion on it. That in and of itself was funny. But the other funny thing was it actually had an expiration date on it. So it was, if you didn't use the $1 billion by said date, it was literally worthless.
Well, it's because of more hyperinflation, right? Now you got Venezuela and other economies doing the same thing, right? It shocks me how they think, this isn't high level economics. You can't simply print off more money. It's not even supply and demand. I mean, it is supply and demand, but I'm just shocked how pretty much every currency throughout the history of the world is ultimately devalued by massive printing and hyperinflation. Now, with war, that makes a little bit more sense, because you've destroyed the economic productive capacity of an economy, and now you have all this currency to chase no goods or services. But, when they say, and here in the United States, the world's greatest economist, the Federal Reserve, Janet Yellen, Ben Bernanke, all these Harvard and Yale and Goldman Sachs dipshits. Let's just print off more money. But it's different this time. It's different, you see. No, every country, every empire, good or bad, has ended up hyperinflating their currency away. And it's technically the same thing here. But again, this gets back to our discussion about why the United States is different with the world reserve currency.
Well, can we just segue a little bit, because we talked about Rome. Now, Rome did have their currency hyperinflate, but the Roman currency wasn't fiat currency. It was gold and silver based. And from what I understand, you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but from what I understand, my study of history was they started to put less and less gold inside the coin. It was becoming more and more copper and scrap metal and less gold.
Right. Yep. That's what they did. They diluted it. It's not signage. There's a specific term for it, but they were essentially diluting it's what we did. No different than what we did with our pennies here. They used to have copper. That's a somewhat has value. And now it's zinc, I think.
It is zinc. Yeah. Actually, there is a little bit of copper in it, but it's like 99% zinc.
Yeah.
I think our pennies are actually copper plated, which sounds really funny. instead of like gold plate, they're actually they're plated with copper. And here's a funny anecdote is that I think it costs the U.S. government 4 cents to produce a single penny.
Oh, good Lord. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they did that.
So, and they won't. I think they won't get rid of it because I don't know, people like Abraham Lincoln's face on there or something like that. But anyway, the point is, so Rome was a little bit different, though. So that's why I'm thinking that what's going on in the United States is a little bit unique in the world history, because Rome, at least, like, there was a gold standard, for lack of a better. I mean, it was a de facto. I mean, people said, well, gold and silver are valuable. They're finite. They're finite resources or finite metals, whatever you want to call them. So you can't print them, like, you know what I mean? They're not paper where you can just
right. They're commodity. They're a commodity currency. They have intrinsic value unto themselves.
Correct. I was always kind of confused by this though. Like, why is gold? Why do people use gold or silver? Because, well, I don't want to say silver, because silver, there are uses for silver, but gold, for example, has no utility. Like, you can't use gold to do anything. You know what I mean?
Oh, come on, John. I bet you could figure this out. Come on. What is gold used for? I'll give you a hint. From time immemorial, it's been used for this. Maybe a little bit less today, but gold has definitely been used for something. Probably the most valuable commodity in the world. Gold is exchanged for one of the most valuable, if not the most valuable commodity in all of human history.
Tell me, brother. Tell me.
Sex. Jewelry.
Oh, right. Okay. Jewelry. Okay. So gold is used for jewelry. Fine. But I mean, that's just like, I mean, if you make, so because women find these shiny trinkets, that's, why? I mean, yeah. Oh, okay. Maybe that's the reason.
Yeah.
No, well, no, because I mean, like, for example, like silver, for example, has like tons of uses. It's used in the medical field. It's used it's a superconductor. It's used in everything from high-speed trains to
phones and things. Yeah.
What do you call it? Solar panels. I mean, silver has tons of, even water purification is silver is used for. I mean, it's got tons and tons of industrial uses where it actually has utility. Where gold, I mean, I think Warren Buffett once said that if like a Martian came down to Earth and he looked at like gold, he would say, "What the fuck purpose does this serve?" You know what I mean? It doesn't. You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't. I mean, even zinc, for example, is like necessary for human health. For cell growth and things like that. But I mean, gold, it doesn't really mean anything. You can say, well, yeah, it looks pretty, but I mean, so does, I mean, and plus, I don't know if I buy the women argument, because, they're the same freaks that, dye their hair blue and red and whatever.
Well, that's today, but back in the olden days. No, but gold and silver, there's other more, shall we say, mature, but no less valid reasons that gold and silver and other precious metals had become default currencies, regardless of which civilization you were in. The Aztecs were doing gold. Gold magically became this. I don't say magically, but the reason why is it has traits that make a good currency. It's divisible, durable, rare, malleable, doesn't decay. Silver does the same thing, but silver and copper are in much more ample quantities. So those are I'd say the main reasons. But even in the industrial times, gold had this extra pull that I would say it was a display of wealth, and it would get you laid. And I know it's very politically incorrect, but usually things that are politically incorrect mean they're 100% true. That's how the economy was built. That's how civilization was made. Men wanted to get laid. Girls like pretty trinkets. You like that? I'll wipe out the entire country to get those pretty trinkets for you, as long as you have sex with me. And that's more true in history and economics than you might think.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you said that. I remember when I was a freshman in college, my political science teacher said, he said the biggest challenge I ever had with economics is based on the presupposition that human beings make rational choices.
Yeah, but it is rational. Everything's rational. Even to a psychosadist murderer, it's rational. Maybe not to other people. maybe not to the benefit of society or his victims or her
Stop
victims.
talking about Davis Serini. But anyway.
Okay. So, but yeah, no, look, we will go down the rabbit hole if we start worrying about psychology and history in the Roman Empire. But to get back to your answer, yes, Rome was a little bit different in the United States because it had commoditized currency. Although there were instances in ancient history, specifically, I believe it was the Chinese or the Koreans, I'm not sure, where fiat or paper currency was first introduced. But the point is now moot in that everything is digital, essentially. We're even beyond paper now. We have digital. All it is a record keeping. And this kind of starts to approach the world of cryptocurrencies, which I don't want to delve into. But yes, Rome is different from the United States of today, although I would still say that it was the world's reserve currency back then because of similar traits that the United States has today, making it the world's reserve currency.
Yeah, I would even say that, like, you know, especially back then, you know, 2,000 years ago, how could people really test to see if a denarii, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, you know, was this, there kind of was a certain amount of trust in it because, you know, it had the emperor's, you know, head stamped on it or something like that. So there was that kind of intrinsic trust. So I would totally agree with you on that. But now let's bring it forward now 2,000 years. Now, are you familiar with the, I think he's a hack personally. I'm not sure what you think of him. Peter Schiff. Could you give us some, I know you heard of this guy. You had to have.
Oh, yeah. No, I was on his show a while ago. He's an economist. He runs an investment group. I think it's Euro Pacific Capital.
Yeah, that's it.
He is officially an economist. And I would say I don't think he's a shill. I think he kind of got trapped into the same concept I did, where he was this classical economist. We're printing off all this money. There's a limited amount of precious metals, and so he's a big gold bug. He's very pro on gold. And what he failed to account for was the same thing I failed to account for, and that is just how worse of a shape the rest of the world would be in relative to the United States dollar. In other words, we were too moral. We were too simplistic in our thinking, where we've tripled the money supply, so gold should go up by 300%. Not that the value of gold actually went up. It's just that there's 3 times as many dollars as there was gold previously before. But again, this gets to the concept of the world's reserve currency. And again, what I talked about is extra outside of the United States, global demand for the US dollar. And so it wasn't like he was malicious or evil or trying to scam or show people out.
I just mean that his logic was like irreparably flawed, and not just that it was flawed. He tend to speak with like such authority, like he kind of almost had a god complex about this.
Well, I do recall, now I could be wrong, but, you know, like, hey, 2012 is the year that gold, you know, now keep in mind people may be coin, and you see this a lot of times where Bitcoin could go to 50,000, says somebody else, and gold will reach 10,000, says someone else as well. I think that's a bit sensationalism, and people that try to make those predictions. Those I predict. Now, I don't think, or I don't know that Schiff ever did it, but at least he did put his money or his investors' money where his mouth was. He did invest in gold. I think he's intellectually honest, because he did try to come up like with a cryptocurrency that was backed by gold. He's not a big fan on cryptocurrency, but he definitely.
Yeah, he kind of missed the boat on that because the cryptocurrency really took off. Now, whether or not that, well, let's not get into the whole crypto thing because
right.
We get that is excuse my French, but that's a fucking rabbit hole. But he did miss the boat on that, and he is someone that, you know, kind of sees himself as the vanguard of the, you know, future economic opportunities.
Right. Well, but that's what every economist aims to be. And see, I could kind of forgive him because the job of an economist is impossible. Now, he was willing to make some bets. He's more brave and bold than I am. Those bets didn't pay off. But he had every bit of fundamentals was correct about precious metals going up. The only fault is that he had is, like me, he failed to see how the playing field had fundamentally changed with the U.S. dollar, the decaying fundamentals of the global economies, and then let's not forget the financial crisis triggered by the United States, by the way, that threw the rest of the world into financial turmoil, which ironically made the dollar more valuable. So a U.S.-caused crisis made the rest of the world go into crisis mode, which sent all the money flooding back to the United States. It's probably the weirdest thing I'll ever see in my lifetime, economically speaking. But yeah, I trust Peter, but I would say that his premises by which he's operating is flawed. And I don't know if he's come around to it yet. Like even I know this, you and I being Gen Xers, I'm pretty confident now. Beforehand, I thought there was no way we're going to see a Social Security check. There was no way that Gen X was going to see a Social Security check and a Medicare check and whatever other goodies old farts get when they get old. But now I'm increasingly confident, only because our days are dwindling and we're getting closer and closer to being old. I'm pretty confident we're going to receive Social Security checks and they're not going to be inflated away. But this is in part due because there's so much foreign demand for our excess dollars that they're binding it up and they're lending money to the U.S. government. And while federal government prints it off and lends the money back to the government, that's another whole boring world of quantitative easing. But I think, and we could go into this a little bit later as to why the fundamentals for the U.S. dollar is better than most would think when you consider these the international aspects of being a world reserve currency. But I'm increasingly confident, even with bad deficits and bad domestic fundamentals, that the U.S. dollar will still have value by the time you and I retire in about 15 to 20 years. Could go to hell in a handbasket. Absolutely could. But as long as the rest of the world doesn't all of a sudden get its act together, I think you and I and pretty much every other Gen Xer can expect to have lived in the best economic period of the United States. Maybe not the highest growing, maybe not, we've had our fair share of recessions, but in terms of government largesse and not having to work, we will have enjoyed probably the easiest life any American has ever endured.
Okay, so you are not, I mean, despite let's say your online persona, you are not as depressive about your outlook on the U.S. economy as one might think,
It's for the wrong reasons. It'd be like finding out your kid is making $500,000 a year and you get excited and you find out because he's dealing drugs. And it's like that. And there's this begrudging bit of respect you have for your son who comes in with $500,000 like, dang kid, I know that's highly illegal and unethical, maybe not unethical, but
thanks for paying off my mortgage.
But thanks for paying off the mortgage, and I appreciate the Ferrari Testarossa outside. It's because of completely unethical reasons. The reason the United States has value, the United States dollar has value, has nothing to do with it has nothing to do with us. It has nothing to do with the United States. It has everything to do with the rest of the world sucking. All right, so let me kind of explain what I mean by this. Let's just admit that in today's integrated international global economy, that there is demand for at least one world reserve currency for a safe haven purposes, for having international trade agreements denominated in a stable currency, and other things that benefit the world economy. It's good to have kind of like, here's this benchmark we go by. Here's this standard we have. Okay, so there is good demand, and the way you get to become the world's reserve currency is a couple things. One, militarily is very obvious. Again, Rome, the United States, do as we tell you. We have value. Why? Because we have nuclear weapons more than anybody else. But more legitimately so would be that we are the world's largest economy. We are the biggest producer of wealth in the world. I still think to this day we account for about 30% of global GDP. So we do have some actual economic tangible value being produced that provides our currency value. Now, another currency or economy or country could come along and dethrone the United States and the United States dollar as the world reserve currency, much like we did the British pound back in World War I. But it's going to take some doing. And the main contenders, the main challengers to the U.S. Dollar dominance is first and foremost China, then followed by maybe Japan and the euro, and then maybe your BRIC countries like Brazil, Russia, and India. Now, if you look at all these countries or regions or economies. Not a single one of them is as big as the United States economy. But the main challengers that do pose a threat, specifically China, they may have a growing and booming economy, but they are horrendously corrupt. Horrendously. And so if you look at the Corruption Perceptions Index, or just the Corruption Index, it's put out by transparencyinternational.org, you'll see most of the main contenders, India, China, Brazil, large countries, large economies, growing, large populations, are just so corrupt, no one's going to trust them. And let's ask you this. Would you rather have a contract with the United States government, or would you rather have a contract with the Chinese government? Would you rather have a contract with Ford Motors, or would you rather have a contract with whatever the Japanese, I think it's Chery is their main auto company? And when you look at the amount, I mean, graft is a tax-deductible expense in most Asian countries. And China is not uncorrupt. I'm sorry, Japan. Think, well, what about Japan? Japan is horrendously corrupt too, not as much as China, but it's certainly more.
I did not know that, Aaron. Could you just expound on that just a little bit? Just a little bit.
Well, I mean, if anyone's listening, let's just go ahead and do an exercise. Maybe you could do it yourself there. Go on Google, type in Corruption Perceptions Index, and do maybe an image search. And you'll see an image of the globe, and green is good and red is bad. And then they have various shades between red and green. And you'll look at most of China, even if it is a first world economy like Japan. Japan is kind of orange. I'd have to double check, but I think low is good. You want a low score, and high is bad. Japan, well, they may have indexed it since last I looked, but Japan is a moderately corrupt economy. China should be red as its freaking communist flag. It should be horrifically maroon red because they and Russia are horrendously corrupt. India, also very corrupt. Brazil, corrupt. So when you account for corruption, the only remaining relatively uncorrupt, large productive economy in the world is the United States. And so when you add those two things, we don't have to bring in nuclear weapons on this. You have the world's largest economy that is relatively uncorrupt. End of discussion. They were worried about, oil and petrodollars in Saudi Arabia and Iran getting, OPEC getting their act together and forming a cartel. And they can't even form a decent oil cartel. Plus, the United States shale oil reserves has destroyed them. China is horrendously corrupt. Russia is horrendously corrupt. India horrendously corrupt. There is no competitor. So even though you may have a large growing foreign economy like China, it's not going to pose a threat to the U.S. dollar's world reserve currency status because no one trusts China. Same thing with India. I mean, they got capital controls in India where you can't bring gold out of the country. Brazil, give me a frickin' break. That is a second world, borderline third world crap hole. They're not ever going to get their act together. They keep electing a borderline communist and then an outright communist. And you get excited when they elect the socialist light guy. There is no country or culture or economy or society that I see that is going to get its act together, start getting uncorrupt, and also going to even come close to having the kind of economic production that would give its currency world reserve status. So, and let me explain one final thing so people can understand that. You might say, well, what about Switzerland? Or if you look at that map again, you'll see the Swedish countries because they're just they're the teacher's pet. The Swedish countries are the teacher's pet of the international organization. They just love the
Scandinavian countries.
Yeah, Scandinavian countries. They all, it's perfect. They're all green. They're just uncorrupt. They're wonderful. Well, there's only, I think, 12 million Scandinavians between Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Switzerland also, I don't know, there may be 10 million. I don't know how many people live in Switzerland. But these economies are so small, they don't have the reservoir of economic production to essentially honor all the currency they would have to print off in order to satisfy the demand for an international world reserve currency. So, in other words, in the short, medium, and I'd even say long term, the United States dollar, we're lucky, man. We literally can print ourselves out of any problem we face. That's what we did with the housing crisis. And you want to talk about, and this is where it gets back to, this was unethical and immoral what we did. Every saver out there who's holding on to US dollars, we've just, I think, tripled the money supply under Obama alone to get ourselves out of the housing bubble. And what we did is we printed off all this money to bail out all the banks and the Federal Reserve. Oh, and by the way, to finance the federal government and its welfare largesse and all the different social programs and the military and all that. Oh, shoot, I lost my train of thought. We print out the money. And in the process, we kept interest rates very low, flooded the market with all these dollars. You got a supply of dollars that need to be lent somewhere. And now we reinflated the asset bubbles that were crashed before. So the stock market is way above where it used to be. Housing prices are way up. They're on par depending on which specific local market you want to look at. But housing prices have recovered. So we essentially.
Well, actually, I think they've where I live in Seattle. They've passed it. I mean, people are paying $1 million for a fucking apartment where I live. So.
Right. But, so we've essentially now, whatever bad, all these mortgage-backed securities, there was a concern that their collateral position was bad. Well, now the collateral position is good. And the reason we got away with it is because the United States sucks less when it comes to corruption than pretty much any other major large economy in the world. So it is quite literally like we can print off gold because the dollar is the new gold. I wouldn't say it's the new gold. I'm sure if we started going Zimbabwean levels of hyperinflation, we could destroy our position. But also keep in mind, here's another thing. All these other major economies in the world did the exact same shit we did. And that was turn on the printing presses, keep interest rates artificially low. So it's kind of like this arms race to the bottom as to who can inflate the currency the most. And when you compare it relatively to one another, not a nominal basis, the United States is still doing relatively well compared to Europe. What's Europe going to do? Europe's not going to produce jack. They ain't got weapons. China, fine, you got weapons, but you're horrendously corrupt. Russia, I like Putin. They're actually growing quite well, but they're not big enough. There's only like 120 million.
Can we talk about Russia just for a second? Because
sure.
One thing is kind of unique about Russia, unlike other countries outside the United States. Well, just let me first say this about the United States. One thing about the United States is we could, like, if the rest of the world disappeared, we could be totally self-sustaining. Like, we can produce enough food, enough energy. We have enough brain power, natural resources, just within our borders to support us. Now, this is not true of like countries like Switzerland. Like, for example, you were saying that, everybody says, oh, Switzerland is so good, or Scandinavia, they have to import all these different things. Like Scandinavia, for example, they have to import food. What's the fucking growing season in Finland, for Christ's sake, you know?
Oh, Australia would be hosed too.
Yeah. But the United States, we have all we need right here. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that we're not as, with Trump, I don't know, the whole Trump trade war thing, one of the reasons that we weren't experienced as much as prosperity as we could have been is because we were just giving the shit away. Because we're like, oh, we're the United States. Yeah, whatever. Yeah, we'll give this to you, even though it's, fucking over the, the average American because we got so much, whatever. It's like a drunken billionaire just handing out the dollar bills. And Trump is like, no, fuck that shit. You guys got to earn your keep. And it, and also like, militarily, we were paying for the defense of all these countries like, Japan and Germany and everybody. And they didn't.
Canada. Don't forget Trudeau.
Yeah, well, don't get me started on Trudeau. That guy's just, I think he is a or I don't know if he, at least before he was prime minister, whatever the fuck they call it up there, he was a self-professed socialist. But my point is that like one of the unique things about Russia is they're very new to capitalism. It's like only been going on there for like 20 years at the most. Mm-hmm. But they have all the food they need. They have all the energy they need. They have all the water. Do you call it? Yeah, water, natural resources. They have everything that they need. Like they're totally self-sustaining, and also they have enough nukes to wipe every country off the planet if they so choose to. So you know what I mean? Like they can't be bullied either. So despite having, because a lot of countries could have like a huge amount of natural resource, like there's a lot of Central American countries like Brazil, for example, that have a huge amount of natural resources, including oil and food and things like that. But they have to do what other countries tell them to because we'll just go in there and take it. You know what I mean? So That's the interesting about Russia. I think Russia's an interesting wild card. I'd be curious to see how Russia plays out in the next 10 years. I don't know if you want to expound on that or not.
Well, Russia is an interesting case because Russia has something else that Brazil and I would say not India, not China, but certainly Brazil doesn't have. That's intelligence. Brazil, the dipshittery where these Latin American countries just vote in socialist communist dictators. I laugh at Brazil. It's just a joke. But Russia's a little bit different. Now, Russia, if you're familiar with their history, is they have, you may say, oh, Russia's a little different. They're a little odd. And you're right, because they didn't go through the rest of what Europe did, or the classical Greece to Rome, Rome to the Dark Ages, to the English Empire, blah, blah, blah. Russia was off on its own little world doing its own thing. And what they basically did was gone from servitude and serfdom to hardcore communism to, as you said, 20 years ago, hey, let's try this capitalist thing that everyone else has been doing for the past 400 to 500 years and seems to be part of human nature. So they're relatively new. Russia is also horrendously corrupt. Often Russia and China vie for who is the most corrupt. So again, you wouldn't want to necessarily be making deals with Russians or investing in rubles as the world's reserve currency. But you're absolutely right that Russia has all the natural resources. Its population is actually very small relative to the amount of land it has. It's not going to overpopulate itself or exhaust its resources. It has the intelligence. Even though they were communists, they certainly gave us a run for the money in terms of the space race, weapons technology, aerospace engineering. I mean, when I was a kid, I always loved studying what the new MiGs were, what's their capacity, and look at this. Heck, they account for plurality of
just on that point, I don't know if you just saw that India is going to be buying the new Russian air defense system, which is pissing off the United States.
Well, they made a better air defense system. Good for them.
Well, yeah, well, that's one thing that the Russians probably did better than us militarily. Maybe the only thing they did better than us militarily was air defense, because they've always been paranoid about it, because they were always, surrounded. Right. Unlike the United States, who had oceans on both sides. So the Russians have always been paranoid about that. So they put a huge amount of, intellectual energy and resources into being able to shoot down our shit, going back to, the U-2 spy plane, and Gary Powers and all that kind of stuff. So that, they still hung on to that. And you don't really, I mean, they're not on par with the United States, but they're a close second.
But they were the number 2 guys for the longest time. We're duking it out. The rest of the world didn't matter. It was us and the Soviets. And disgusting and evil as communism was, you had to hand it to think about what they achieved with a communist economy. This huge handicap, that's like not having arms and still being able to box. That's like having no penis and being a porn star. If you want to handicap yourself with communism, what I'm pointing out is the people are very resilient, very intelligent, albeit they didn't go through the traditional path that most of Western civilization went through. So they are still somewhat, they are quite very corrupt, not the Russian people necessarily, but its institutions, government, and business. You have the oligarchs, you have the mafia and all that, which I would contend is just more growing pains, where I would say in Asia, it's a bit more endemic and inherent to the culture. So if there is going to be an economy that threatens the dollar as the world's reserve currency, it could very well be the ruble, but that is going to be so far down the road. Now, Russia's economy is growing. It's growing very well. Despite him being a dictator, I personally like Putin because of the balls he's got. He just does not fuck around. I know, oh, yes, he's done bad, but it's like, that's the guy. That's basically the guy you need. Inevitably, yes, I'd like to see it become less corrupt. I'd like to have a very clear and free democracy.
Well, in fairness to Putin, he has cut down on a lot of the corruption. I mean, when he first became president or prime minister, I always get they have both over there.
He's done both, yeah. Because there's an example of corruption. Medvedev was temporarily I think it was the president, because Putin by the Constitution couldn't run for more than 2 terms or 3 terms in a row, and then Medvedev came in. And then Putin came back over because it wasn't in a row. So
right, yeah.
So there's certainly some corruption there.
No, but I mean, but they were they were very legalistic about it. Like they didn't because there was a time I remember actually seeing a Russian political quote unquote scientist talking about this, where people were afraid that once Putin left, that all the progress the Russia had made since the time, when he took office in 99 or 2000, because they were in a huge amount of debt. I don't know if you remember this, and it was all paid off within the 8 years of Putin's tenure. And then, his term was up and he pretty much totally turned the country around from people literally starving in the street to all of a sudden, well, they're a real country again. And they're not, they're not U.S. lapdogs anymore. They're going to say, go fuck you.
Right. Well, him and Yeltsin did an amazing job.
Oh no, Yeltsin was a fucking crook.
But he stopped the communists. That's the transition from communism to what is, albeit crony capitalist economy. That transition, I mean, keep in mind, it's only been 27 years now since communism fell. That's kind of lightning speed when you look at countries and economies and cultures completely switching economies. So again, there's certainly our faults that you happen to have with Putin, but he's definitely navigated those waters very well and has served the Russian people very well, I think. But I don't think it's going to come to the point that the ruble is going to be threatening the United States dollar anytime soon, again, because of those corruption issues.
Yeah, I agree. And not just corruption issues. I mean, their economy is so tiny compared to the United States. But okay, now I just will transition onto this. How do you, moving away from the United States, and let's go back to Western Europe or the EU. How do you, and I don't know how much you've read about this or, numbers you've tried to digest about this, but the amount of largesse, to use your words, that the government is going to be forced to dole out in the next 10 years because of this huge influx of illiterate, unskilled fucking criminals that have been coming into the European Union, like literally by the millions. And because I'm not just talking about how much the government will have to pay each one of these people in checks, but just think about all the costs, the ancillary costs of this, having to pay for schooling their children, the medical costs that they will incur, the lowering of property values in the neighborhoods that they occupy,
policing costs, the legal costs, judicial system costs.
Yeah, judicial system. Yeah, so you see where I'm going with this. So
right.
If you could war game that out just a little bit, just as a mental exercise for our audience.
Well, what I liken it to is people say, where do you think the United States is going? And 20 years ago, I say we're going to be like France. We're just going to have this slow decay. France wasn't in crisis. France was not, it's just France. It limps along at 1.5 GDP growth. They add an extra 4 to 5% debt to GDP. The people are lazy. And this was back when I used to be an economist and study and look at labor force participation rates and labor productivity index and all that. And I say, Aaron, what do you think? I say, I think we're going to be like France in about 20 to 30 years. And it's basically the same thing now. You're going to see at the cellular level, and that would be the individual, a decay from the ground up. Normally, empires would collapse by war or invasion. A superior force would come in. But it's going to be, again, a revisitation of Rome where we will collapse from within the inside. So that's going to happen in Europe and let's not just blame immigrants either. The big thing for 20 years ago, way before the immigrant invasion occurs, which has legitimate concerns unto itself, Europeans are lazy. They are lazy, sad, pathetic people. Yes, there are some hardworking people. Yes, there are stars like Ireland that cut its government bloat, became an Asian tiger, and boosted its standards of living.
The
Celtic tiger. And is a classical textbook example of how to grow an economy and improve the standards of living for their people. But the rest of the Europeans wanted to be taken care of cradle to grave, be it Spaniards, Italians, Switzerland's a little bit different. Monaco, Malta, Andorra, the not Emirates, what are they called? Not protectorates. They're essentially kingdoms. Liechtenstein. They're
Oh
taking
yeah, but
care of their
they're
own.
not really countries in a real sense.
No, but that's what I mean.
Gambling casinos or something like that.
They're clubs. They're clubs of fuck you. No, we're not going to go socialist. But Germany, the Scandinavian countries, the only reason Norway has its shit together is because of oil. Sweden, admittedly, I'll grant Sweden this. Sweden does have a balanced budget amendment, so that's good. I'll grant they're at least paying for it. But mainland Europe and Western Europe is basically it's your favorite group of people, baby boomers. They all want to retire at 50. You want to see disgusting pension outlay costs that's going to dwarf whatever the immigrants are going to cost them, at least in the medium term. It's the old people and the old burden, and you don't have to work at 55 or older. You get free everything. You got free everything. So that is the decay I see happening in Europe. And then when you throw in immigrants that have no desire to assimilate, have no desire to work, and some do, I'm sure, but they're going to turn it.
But Aaron, even if they did have a desire to work, and I'm sure, of course, there's going to be people who have desire to work. I think I believe most people do, just because
I don't. You're a better man than me. I don't. I think those people want to sit on their ass.
But my point is that what they were showing is that many of these immigrants are illiterate in their own language. Never mind the language of whatever country that they end up in, whether it's Germany or Sweden or France or whatever. Right. They can't read or write in their own language, Swahili or whatever it is. So how are you going to expect these people as adults to learn and read and write fucking German? I mean, you and I are reasonably intelligent guys. We're on the other side of the median of IQ. And I don't think, if I asked you to learn German in 6 months, all due respect to your intellectual ability, I think you'd have a tough time.
I could do it, but I would have a tough time. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and you're going to expect these people who can't read and write in their own language to read and write in German, for fuck's sake? Come on.
Yeah. Well, I don't expect them to. That's the whole point. So, and the lie that, and let's be very clear, it's the socialist parties want to bring in government-dependent voters. The lie that they tell everybody else is that we have a pension crisis. We have an old healthcare crisis. We need more people. We need a larger population. And you stupid natives aren't breeding enough. So now we got to import all these people in here. But these people are not going to have the productive capacity to, one, support themselves, let alone pay the confiscatory theft-like level of taxes. They're going to be required to support the old farts that they presumably were brought in to pay for. So it's going to be a continued decay. It might accelerate a little bit depending on the labor force productivity of these new immigrants coming in. But I think the European Union will slowly decay into a nothingness. They'll go, but you'll see more Brexits. You'll see people miss their Maastricht, or not Maastricht treaty. What was the EU treaty? Maybe it was Maastricht. They have to meet these budgetary goals. They'll blow through those. They won't match them. And financially, the European Union will just not be tenable anymore. Won't be sustainable anymore. And then
my theory on that sorry to interrupt you, but my theory on that is once Germany experienced, because I mean, let's be honest, the only reason the EU survived this long is because of Germany. Can we agree on that?
Right, we can agree on that.
So the moment they have an economic hiccup, the EU is just going to fall apart.
Right. No, I mean, it'd have to be a pretty severe economic hiccup. But again, we're talking an outlook, a horizon of 50 to 100 years, in my estimation.
Oh no, I'm not even going out that. I'm not. To be honest, I'm not interested in what happens
after you die.
Yeah, exactly. I don't look. I don't,
after you die, fuck it.
Well, pretty much. I don't have any kids. Well, yeah. I mean, I probably do, but I mean, none that I know of. Specifically. But so I'm like, fuck it, who cares? And even if the kids that I do have, when I'm dead, I won't know about them anyway. So who cares? So I'm kind of like, you're a nihilist like me, pretty much, right?
Pretty much, yep.
And by the way, for our audience, we're semi-joking, only semi-joking.
I'm very semi-joking, yeah. I'm more like quarter joking, because I don't care. Why would I care? I'm not here. I don't. And I mean, not to get personal, but I get awfully sick and tired of decades, quite literally decades, of being told what a mean, nasty guy I am because I point out mathematical facts about budgets and economic growth and finances. And it's kind of like, as far as I'm concerned, Europe and the United States deserve what it's getting. So I'm not, I kind of, like I said, we're going to pull it off. The Gen X, I think, is going to be like the Millennium Falcon going through the Death Star in Return of the Jedi, the third one. And we're going to get out of there just in time before it blows up. Because we have the printing presses. I think the United States will still be the world's reserve currency by the time we're in our 70s and 80s and are dying. But after that, yeah, again, I'd have to look at the finances then. But 20 or 30 years later, a new Russia might rise. China might have its act together. And if that happens and the U.S. dollar goes down and is no longer the favored world reserve currency, all those dollars are going to come back to the only place they can be spent, and that is U.S. domestic shores. And then the millennials will get to deal with it. And I'll be very, very, very happy looking at them up above from heaven or down below from hell.
Yeah, I just, this is totally off topic economically, but I am curious because I never got an accurate take on this. Which generation do you hate more, the baby boomers or the millennials? I know where I stand, but I'm not sure where you stand.
Boy, that's a tough one. Someone paid me to do an asshole consulting video on the generations, and I did a very methodical, scientific, like based on voting, who was voting for socialism, who was voting for freedom. And the millennials, kind of by a significant margin, have voted the most communist, anti-freedom, anti-liberty type. But you also have to account for the fact that the millennials were brought up by baby boomers, or failed to be brought up, and old Gen Xers. And whereas the baby boomers, you had the best generation ever. You had the World War II generation. You had everything. Here, you can't even, there's no other way to describe it. Here, you got the keys to the United States. No country even comes close to us. And they managed to screw it up.
The keys to the kingdom.
Here's the keys to the kingdom. We got it all polished, souped up. Here's some nuclear weapons, nuclear power. Don't worry about Russia. We'll kick their asses later. And they, within, I was shocked. I was watching a show called The Saint, 1962. Roger Moore, very young Roger Moore. Everybody's dressed real nice in 1962. And it shocked me that by 1967, like a short 5 years later, there'd be bell bottoms and brown and plaid and hairy armpits and ugly people and horrible looking cars in those 5 short years. And so it is a draw. It really is a draw. But I'm going to have to go with the baby boomers. But man, when those millennials get lippy and act like they know everything, then I change my mind. So I guess it ebbs and flows in between the two.
It ebbs and flows. I would say personally, I don't know if you care, but my opinion is I hate the baby boomers more kind of for the reason that you said, is because they had more to throw away, where you could argue that the millennials, what did they inherit? So, the baby boomers, they, like you said, they had it all, and they
had everything. You had it.
and they didn't have the excuse of the millennials where they said, well, we had no role models, which is true, because they had the horrible role models, where the baby boomers had the best role models. I mean, your dad fucking stormed the beach at fucking Normandy, motherfucker. I mean, what is your problem? I mean, what happened to your balls?
No. Well, and anyway, but so all of it adds up. The same thing's going to happen in the United States. I predict is going to happen in Europe. We have, albeit at a less pace, we still have some remnants of a stronger work ethic here, despite the baby boomers' best intentions and the millennials kicking and screaming, not wanting to work. And then we also have our own immigration problems and other cultures that want to assimilate, or I'm sorry, don't want to assimilate, just want to collect the government check. So what I think, what will end up happening is it's not that the United States is really going to be dethroned from a world reserve currency position as much as we're going to decay and fall apart like the Roman Empire, and something will fill the vacuum or the void at that time, whichever happens to be the most powerful economy in the world at that point.
Well, would you agree with, this is my thesis, would you agree with this, that basically if the United States falls, the whole world is going to fall? So, I mean, I look at it this way. I think you were kind of alluding to this. I'll use a metaphor that, like, we may have herpes, but the rest of the world has AIDS. So if we fall, they're already, it'd be like the whole world falls, and then we're going to have to restart, like, kind of a phoenix out of its own ashes kind of a thing.
Right. There would certainly be like a dark or a medieval period that would occur. But keep in mind, the funny thing about currencies, people think, well, who came up with currency? Who came up with money? I wish I came up with money. Well, money is a naturally forming phenomenon. There has to be money because it's just such a pain in the ass to barter directly. It's too consuming. And I say the exact same thing. I'd say a world reserve currency, especially because we're so integrated internationally now. I mean, it's almost like we are one global economy. There almost has to be one world reserve currency. And if it's not the United States, one will rise to the occasion. And whichever country has its fucking act together, economically speaking, corruptionally speaking, they win. And the inordinate amount of economic benefits that will be conferred upon that country is almost incalculable. Almost incalculable. But that assumes, again, that there's a global economy left if the U.S. decides to go belly up.
Okay, well, fair enough. Well, I think we'll end it here, unless there's something that you wanna add.
No, just kind of did that answer your question? Because I know you were wrestling with this idea about how does the world reserve currency work and debt. How does it all play out? I mean, that kind of did that answer the questions you had in your mind?
Well, kind of. I mean, I think that you were not as black pilled or ultra pessimistic as I thought about the fate of the U.S. economy.
But remember, again, it's only because the kid's selling drugs. It's only because the kid's selling drugs and I'm not.
But that's my point. Is because I don't get me wrong. I mean, there's a lot of. Let me put it this way. I mean, of all the problems the United States has, I would say our economy is the least of them. I would say that our economic problems are a symptom of other deeper problems that we have. Like, for example, earlier on, you were talking about, things that destroy society or civilization. You would say famine, plague, religious upheaval,
Mhm.
invasion. Now, none of those are true. Did you realize that, like, for example, Germany, Japan, pretty much every society has experienced plague, religious upheaval, famine, and they're still around. The only one constant of a society being destroyed is how do I say this? Immigration to demography when that changes. Like, for example, Germany, for example, let's do that's a classic example because they've experienced all this. They've experienced plague, two massive plagues. They experienced religious upheaval, the 30 Years' War that literally wiped out 1/3 of their population. Can you imagine that? Every third person you knew dead.
Mhm.
2 world wars that they lost, completely destroyed. Yet Germany survived. So that's not true. That's not what destroys societies.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you could survive as long as somebody's still left alive to do that. But if you disincentivize your natives to breed, and then you import a bunch of people who don't share it, okay, yeah, the border's still going to be there. Okay, this line here is the United States of America, but the culture is gone. I mean, Britain's kind of the same way too. Now I have to go back to my British history and figure out who was there first. But I believe it was the Normans were there first, and then the
No, the Normans were not.
Anglo-Saxons. Okay, and then the Anglo-Saxons came in and wiped them all out. Okay, yeah, the British Isles are still there. England and Britain were slowly forming. But yeah, I'm talking about today in the United States, the culture that we're used to now, the culture that we've had and grew up with, that the movies were made of and our history books are written about. That will go away. Inevitably.
No, Aaron, I think I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
My point is that the ethnic group that existed, as long as, like, you look at Germany that experienced, and I use them just because they're the most extreme example. You could use Japan as another example. They've experienced, all sorts of, political upheaval. They've experienced, foreign invade, actual conquest by the United States. I mean, 2 freaking atom bombs dropped on,
Yeah.
I mean, and they're still there, and they're still, they're the 3rd largest economy in the world. So the idea that, what destroys a civilization isn't uh, isn't any of those things. It's not, economic collapse or whatever. That's not what destroys Germany experienced several economic collapses. It's still around. It won't be for long, but not because of that. It's not going to be around because there's no more Germans. And the same is true with the Roman Empire. Like, a lot of people don't realize this. I don't know if you've ever read Gibbon's. It's very old. It was written in like 1789, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, where he actually talks about how one of the reasons the Roman Empire fell is it was no longer Roman.
Right. You had all the different Gauls and the barbarian chieftains who could be part Roman or could go from slaves to gaining citizenship. No, and you're right. At the cellular level, it's no different than cancer. Okay, you have human cells, and now it's cancer. Well, the cancer is taken over. That entity will die. Now, the cancer may go on in some other new form. A new history, or not history, a new country or culture may arise. But whatever it once was is no more. And yeah, you're 100% right. Humans can handle pretty much anything, as you pointed out. The United States even filed for bankruptcy a couple times. We defaulted on our debts, and economic crises haven't affected us. We had the Great Recession. We had the 1907 bank panic, and the 1890, I think, was another horrible recession that we have. But in the end, what you had was a group of people that persevered, adhered to some kind of culture, some kind of commonality, and worked. That was it. They worked. And now you just have way too many parasites, both domestic, both native and foreign, coming and living within the borders, both of Europe and the United States. That in the long term, I think that we will have an economic collapse. And then you could also say maybe there's a cultural collapse of sorts. But in the meantime, I don't see that happening. And I do see the United States maintaining its integrity at least until our lights are turned out. And that's really all that matters in my short-sighted, evil, selfish mind. That's really all I care about, is I just want the lights kept on until I'm dead. And then afterwards, and it doesn't matter afterwards or not, whether I'm here or not, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I think maybe I'm a nihilist enough, or I'm pessimistic enough, or I'm dark enough, or I just don't care enough to point out that this dark end of the United States, the end of Western civilization, is a statistical likeliness. Now, Matt Forney, he's going to be very upset if he hears this. He's got a little bit of hope left in him, but that's because he's young. He'll get it kicked out of him soon enough. But yeah, right now, I don't think the economic fundamentals are that bad. And you are right. And and then every empire dies and it comes. Every empire. 2,000 years from now, the globe and the map is all going to look different. But as far as we're concerned, meaning as far as our lives that we're going to be here consciously on this planet, I'm pretty optimistic that we're going to pull that Millennium Falcon through the Death Star and blow it up.
Okay, well, fair enough. So we're going to end it here, but I will ask you, if you are so willing, to speak for 15 minutes and give some advice to our younger listeners, okay, that may not...
15 minutes, are they going to listen?
Well, I don't know, but look, I mean, if you're on the Death Star and we're in the Millennium Falcon and we're aiming for the reactor core there, what is your advice to them? What's their best way to, get off that Death Star and have a decent quality life? Like, if you could just sum it up now, like I said, you can go to captaincapitalism.blogspot.com. You can read all about all your posts, which are great, and all your books, and they will be linked to. But if you could just speak extemporaneously and give us some of that old Cappy wisdom.
What I would give to my 20-year-old self or 15-year-old self kind of thing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, first I'd say go buy and read the book, Enjoy the Decline, and then read the chapter called Revenge, because that is basically how to be happy and make the most of life. So it's very, what would I say? Practical, hands-on, instructional. But more just off the cuff, I would say, one, be a minimalist. That's absolutely important. You do not need fancy toys. And one thing I will grant the millennials and the younger people this, I think they know that. I think they are not like, oh, I got to get my Z Cavaricci jeans, my France Varney shirt, and my Ron John surf shop shirt, which is all too old. No one knows what I'm talking about. But I think they know that having fancy cars, fancy McMansions, and fancy clothes is all bullshit. I think they got that. 2, you have to realize the most important thing in life is other human beings. Things do not matter. I mean, yeah, you got to eat. Yeah, it's fun to drive motorcycles. You know, go have some fun. But if it came down to like, hey, Aaron, you could have a really cool friend, or you can have a 1972 Mach 1 Mustang in perfect condition, I'll take the really good friend, because the really good friend is going to provide me more value, intellectual stimulation, and is what I like to call intellectually infinite. The Mach 1 Mustang drives and sits there is really fun, but it's not infinite. That's all it does, is it drives it. It's really fun. My buddy,
good phrase, by the way, intellectually infinite. I'm gonna write that one down.
My buddy could come up with a different thought. He could come up with change his mind. He could spar. He could change tactics. That's all guys essentially do, is compete to who can insult each other the most. And it's a very good game, and you got to tip your hat when you get a good zinger in on you. But falling in love with a girl you love, having a good time, spending time with family and friends. Like my nieces, absolutely love my nieces because they think I'm God, because of the simplest shit. Like I can throw the baseball.
Well, they're not wrong. They're not wrong, Aaron. You are God. But anyway, keep going.
Yes, I don't like telling people that too much. But no, simple stuff like, you know, I take them out to feed fish with old stale bread, and they think I've worked magic. You know, I throw a ball over a fence, and they think, you know, I'm Hercules. So that's also very important, is to put people at the focus of your life, because nothing really beats great conversation. Nothing. Okay.
Yes.
A wild, crazy orgy with a bunch of chicks would probably beat a lot of conversation, but a very, very close second is a really great conversation. So, and maybe you could converse while having sex with a lot of women. Aside from that, though, things really don't matter. I mean, you got to eat, you got to have food, clothing, shelter. Third or fourth thing, whatever I'm up to now, is gain financial independence. Minimalism will help with that, but also having some kind of self-employment where you do not, life is too fucking short to answer to the sadistic, low IQ assholes that are going to become your boss. And I had to do
that, Aaron. Amen. You know, we're both Gen Xers. You know, but for those who are listening, yes, we're old men. We're in our freaking 40s. Trust me, life is too short for that bullshit.
Yeah, and I'll tell another reason we could testify as to why that statement is true. Now, we had to deal with baby boomer bosses, and I swear to God, for fun, I would just, if there were no consequences, I would hunt down every baby boomer boss I had and kneecap them. I'm not even joking. I would just like, hey, remember me? Wham! Because these are sick fucks. These are sick fucks. And another thing is, much as I hate the baby boomers, I'm no fan of my own generation because I lived with them. I went to school with them. And you do not want Gen X bosses are no better. They're probably even worse now because they're all obsessed about diversity training and sensitivity and safe rooms and, oh, we got to get quotas. And you got to escape this. And what it is it's an insane asylum. You're going to have to work a little bit. You're going to have to work a cubicle job. You're going to have to suffer. But it's self-employ or die, basically, because life is too damn short to sit a fucking hour one-way commute and an hour one-way back and then sit in front of a goddamn cube in front of a goddamn screen, listening to some 48-year-old harpy with her master's from dipshit business university, yeah, with her eggs drying up, and she's going to have you attend the women's empowerment. Yeah, fuck that. No, life is too damn short. So get self-employed, minimalism. Don't spend more than you make. And then I guess the last bit of advice, God, I don't know. Go have fun.
Enjoy life. Don't be, don't be black pilled about it. Look, there's shitty things out there, but look, we're on this merry-go-round for a cup of coffee. Enjoy it, okay? It's all you get. Now, I don't want to, disrespect people's religious beliefs or whatever, but whatever. Just enjoy it as much as you can, but don't waste it, okay? Just assume that this is the only ride you're going to get on this amusement park ride. And enjoy it. And
And I was going to say, I mean, you and I are pretty dark guys. I mean, this conversation has not been full of puppies and flowers and big-titted redheads. This has been very dark. It's the world's going to collapse, and basically, nanny, nanny, boo-boo, I'm going to die before the lights go out. Ha ha, sucks to be you if you're younger. But I would have to talk to you a little bit more, but I certainly could speak for myself. I have so much fun in life because I realize these bad things are happening and life is going to end, and we endured it. I mean, and so even though this may sound dark and macabre and oh my God, Aaron and John are probably just going to go blow their brains out. The fuck if I am, because for every darkness that has prompted me to value and savor the freedom and the time I have now. So I am always golfing. I am always motorcycle riding. I'm hiking. Only reason I didn't do it today because it's 105 out in Vegas. I went swimming in the swimming pool. I eat good food. I go hang out and have good cigars. I do what I am trying to maximize my fun, and I have a ton of fun. And so just what I'd be even more concerned about, here's another little bit of advice. We'll throw this one in here. I don't trust people that are always happy and everything's perfect in their life. You know, like people who like school, there's something wrong, something seriously mentally wrong with people who like school. There's something horrendously bad and off about those people. But the curmudgeon, the old angry man, chances are it's because he was an idealist at one time, maybe fell in love, maybe had a great wife and some great family, but he actually knows what's really valuable in life. So while you're here, I'm not saying you have to be everything is happy, you know, no, everything is awesome, that song. But go have fun. Don't put work first. Work to live, don't live to work. Get some great hobbies that are adventuring, you know, stay in shape, hike mountains, hike across the Badlands, hike canyons, ride motorcycles if you're daring enough to.
Well, I would say, like, guys, if you can, like, martial arts or boxing, I mean, that's
yeah.
You might want to try that. You know, whatever. I mean, hiking is cool too, but you know, whatever.
I'd like to say ask out girls, but that's becoming more and more of a dangerous prospect.
Yeah, we don't want to putting these guys in prison, Aaron. Come on.
I don't know. It's sad, but and there is a little bit more wisdom to it than the obvious risks now that come associated with it. Don't put the opposite sex, both men and women, I'm speaking to, as the sole goal and purpose of your life. Focus on you. I see a lot of guys that are just addicted to pussy, which you're programmed to be. You know, you girls, girls, girls. I understand. We were all there at one time. But, man, you leave a lot on the table and pass up a lot of good years of your life chasing after women when you could have been learning a good skill. You could have learned to fix cars. You could have gone on a huge road trip. You could have traveled Europe. And ladies, the same. Although I think maybe it's the opposite for women. I can't speak for them. But I think women have been told and they're following that you shouldn't put men at the center of their life. And they're out doing other things, pursuing careers.
Ladies, don't go traveling Europe and stuff like that and just, running a cock carousel. Trust me, that'll lead to nothing but a barren womb and probably an STI. So don't do that.
Yeah, I don't know about that. So, I mean, I would say women should at least revisit putting a man in the front and center of their life because they are so indoctrinated and skewed not to. That, again, the most important thing on the planet is other humans. And one of the key people, if not the key person in your life, is going to be your spouse. But I think a lot of young women are so indoctrinated and brainwashed. You must get a career. You must get a master's and outsource your kid to daycare if you want to have a kid. And you don't need no man-fish bicycle. I would almost say for women, it's kind of the reverse. Like, yeah, you might want to think about a guy. I'm not saying don't go to Europe. I'm not saying don't get yourself a degree.
Well, no, get a degree, but seriously, what are you going to Europe for? Like to experiment with like foreign dick? I mean, if you're sincerely going to Europe because let's say you're a history buff or something like that, and you want to
architecture and whatever,
fine, right? But I mean, if you're going to Europe to quote unquote experience the culture, that's code word for saying I want some foreign dick. And trust me, the women, I'll just say this, look, and the statistics bear this out. The more dicks you put inside you, the less happy you're going to be in life in the long term.
I'm glad I went from international world reserve currency economic talk to don't put a lot of foreign dick in you. I'm glad we've covered.
Okay, so we're going to anyway. Thank you so much, Aaron. And like I said, visit his blog, captaincapitalism.blogspot.com.
Right.
You can read his several books, Reconnaissance Man, Worthless, And what do they get to?
Well, I could give you the whole stuff. It'll be easier. There's Worthless, Curse of the High IQ, Black Man's Guide Out of Poverty, Bachelor Pad Economics.
Oh yeah, Bachelor Pad Economics. That was
Enjoy the Decline, Reconnaissance Man, and Behind the Housing Crash. Those are all the books I got out there.
And also, Aaron is available for consulting. He charges reasonable rates because what do you break it into 10-minute blocks? Your rate?
No, well, it's as long as it needs to be. So, on average, it's $35 for a video response, $25 for an email. In my consulting company, it's called assholeconsulting.com. We consult primarily younger people who want to not become miserable, angry, pissed off people like you and me. They're like, "Oh my God, I don't want to become him." Well, listen to me. Go a different path.
Or I would even add parents of people who, let's say, have children who are in high school right now. Probably could use this advice too, because you are the people that would be cutting the checks for their potential college choices.
Right. No, there's no age. I mean, I've had 70-year-olds consulting me, and I've had, gosh, I think 14-year-olds, high school freshmen consulting me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, no, so I'm just saying in general, it's a lot of younger people asking for advice, like, how do I not screw up? Well, don't major in the liberal arts. There you go. Give me $35 and get out of here. Then the other side I got is olderbrother.com. That is going to be a more politically correct variant and backup channel to assholeconsulting.com. But you can check out the Older Brother podcast just by searching it. Or go to olderbrother.com.
I'll put the link after this compresses. I'll put the link to because you've been kind enough to have me on that a couple of times.
Yeah, you'll be on tomorrow too, hopefully, right?
Yes, I will.
Cool.
I'm going to be a good boy, and as I'm going to be very adult-like and agree to the terms of when I said I would be there. Anyway, okay, I got to end this now. So, anyway, Aaron Clarey, thank you so much for being on. To everybody that's listened, thank you so much for listening. You can get all Aaron's links below. And anyway, we're out of here. Thank you. If you like this, please comment and subscribe and like. Okay, thank you.